I was one of the older brothers, especially the hate they already had. 8 says, his brothers responded, so you think you're going to be our king, do you? Do you actually think you will reign over us? And they hated him all the more because of his dream and because of the way he talked about them. Soon Joseph had another dream. And again he told his brothers, and listen, I have had another dream, he said. The sun, the moon, and the 11 stars bowed down before me. Joseph has 11 brothers. I don't know about you, but that would bother me if I was an older brother. But how many of you know how to interpret your dreams? All our dreams are locked in by our 5 senses. Sight, smell, touch, feel, hear, how we sense something. Our emotions get involved in trying to determine what we think a dream is. And every one of us come up with a box like this. And we think that's what the dream's about. We think that's the purpose of the dream. We think we have it figured out so we can go ahead and go ahead of God. I'm sure none of you have ever done that besides me. But in the midst of it, he's having this dream. And that's the second one. And again, the same thing, but this time even more authority was involved. And it says in verse 10, it says, this time he told the dream to his father, as well as to his brothers. And the father scolded him. What kind of dream is this? He asked. Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow to the ground before you? But while his brothers of Joseph, his father wondered what the dream meant. It's hard for you to interpret somebody else's dream. The only one who can is God. Joseph will talk about that later. If I get just a clear enough picture to get direction from a dream, that's the most you should ever assume. Because dreams evolve. They don't just happen. I'll show you what I'm talking about in this passage. So verse 12. Soon after this, Joseph's brothers went to the pasture of their father's flock in Shechem. When they had been gone for some time, Jacob said to Joseph, your brothers are pasturing the sheep at Shechem. Get ready and I will send you to them. I am ready to go, Joseph replied. Go and see how your brothers in the flocks are getting along, Jacob, and then come back and report to me. So Jacob has done the things that he needs to keep track of his family. And he's sending Joseph now to check on his brothers. Sounds like a simple story, and there's a whole passage, the whole message just in what's happening just in this part. But we're going to continue on. In verse 18 it says, when Joseph's brothers saw him coming, they recognized him in the distance. As he approached, they made plans to kill him. Here comes that dreamer, they said. Come on, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns. We can tell our father that a wild animal has eaten him, and then we'll see what becomes of his dreams. We'll stop there. Joseph stated his dreams, and his brothers said, I have more power than God's plan, and I can stop what God intends. Have you ever figured out that when God says something is going to happen, the guarantee is it will?
Yes.
Just as God said it to be. But people try to defy God all the time and try to keep that from happening. And so it makes it such a difference. So from there, we're going to drop down to 25. The brothers didn't kill him. So in verse 25, it says, then, just as they were sitting down to eat, they had already caught him and put him in the cistern, but hadn't killed him. They looked up and saw a caravan of camels from a distance coming towards them. It was a group of Ishmaelites, traders, taking a load of gum, balm, and Arabic resin from Galilee to Egypt. When Judah said to his brothers, what will we gain by killing our brother? We will have to cover up the crime. Instead of hurting him, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and traders. After all, he's our brother, our own flesh and blood. And his brothers agreed. So when the Ishmaelites who were from Midian traders came by, Joseph's brother out of the cistern and sold him to them for 20 pieces of silver, and the traders took him to Egypt. I don't know about you, but if I were Joseph, I'd be doubting my dream. Here I am with my father and all my brothers. I'm in a place where whatever this dream really is supposed to mean can happen, and Joseph just got lifted up, taken to Egypt to put as a slave. What was Have any of you had dreams that have been dampened? Torn apart? Made to feel like they would never happen? Yeah. We all have, haven't we? I see I'm supposed to, but on the way to X, I get sent over to B. I don't know how I got there. And how am I going to do X if I'm way over here? Joseph would have had worries and doubts. He would have had things that, well, did I really hear God? I'm sure each of us in this room have said those words. God, am I really hearing you? Is this really you? Because nothing is happening the way I think it should be happening. Because not that we try to tell God how it should happen, but we do that pretty regularly. Yeah. Because we're looking at the little individual moment, not at the big picture. And that's what gets us in trouble. Down in verse 31, it says, we're talking about the brothers lied to the father. Then the brothers killed a young goat and dripped it on Joseph's robe in the blood. They sent the beautiful robe to their father with this message: look at what we found. Doesn't this robe belong to your son? They couldn't admit what they did. The guilt and shame that would be on them. God shows how real we are, how human we are. Sometimes you and I may make a mistake on somebody else. Could be on a loved one, a family member, a friend, a co-worker. And the same could happen from them on us. There's always somewhere there's opposition. You and I want to call it the devil. And that's what it is. But the devil works through people just like God does. People speak in your life things that are wrong, change your direction, cause you to want to give up, just not even try anymore. But somewhere we have to make a difference. Down in verse 36, we find out that meanwhile the Midianite traders arrived in Egypt, where they sold Joseph to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Potiphar was a captain of the guard. Now we're not going to go into a lot of the details, because tonight's discussion is not about the little details. It's about the big picture. And so that's why we're going to keep going. So we're going to bypass and move all the way to chapter 39 for the moment. And in verse 2, Joseph is now a slave. And all of a sudden it says, the Lord was with Joseph, so he succeeded in everything he did as he served in the home of his Egyptian master. I don't know about you, but I get confused. I've just been sold, given to the hands of Potiphar. I'm a slave. And yet God comes right down and starts blessing him in the midst of absolute horror. He can't even imagine. He was equal to anyone when he was the son of Jacob. But now he's a slave and not in control of anything about his life. Somewhere there we have to realize, what are we going to do? Joseph is doing everything right, so Potiphar puts everything under his control, and next thing you know, he's in charge of everything, and Potiphar's wife starts after him, wanting to have a relationship with him. And he keeps denying her, no, I can't do this against God. And he always said that first. Then he said, I can't do this against my master Potiphar, for he has put everything within my hands except his wife. And that's off limits. And he said, I cannot do that. And so by holding on to his righteousness, he leaves and goes to jail. And so it says here in chapter 39, verse 19, it said, Potiphar was furious when he heard that his wife's story about how Joseph had treated her. So he took Joseph and threw him into the prison where the king's prisoners were held. And there he remained. But the Lord was with Joseph in the prison and showed him faithful love. And the Lord made Joseph a favorite with the prison warden. So now we have Joseph, who's been sold to Potiphar, was blessing everything of Potiphar's, but everything he did was successful, abundantly successful. And then he's wrongly accused and put in prison, and all of a sudden the Lord continues to bless him there. And the next thing you know, he's now the favorite of the warden, of the person over all the prison. What do you do when nothing makes sense? What do you do when you have something in your heart that you feel God has for you to do, and everything gets in the way, and you keep getting in trouble, but while you're in trouble, not of your own cause, the next thing you know is you turn around and you find out that, God, you're blessing me. What's going on? You blessed me in Potiphar, now he's blessing him in the prison. Again, how do we look for the bigger picture? And so, while Joseph's in the chapter 40, it says, sometime later, Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and chief baker offended their royal master. Pharaoh became angry with the two officials, and he put them in the prison where Joseph was, in the place of the captain of the guard. Then in verse 5 it says, while they were in prison, Pharaoh's cupbearer and the baker each had a dream one night, and each dream had its own meaning. Now I want you to think about it now. Here's Joseph, who's had two dreams, and his whole world has been turned upside down. Joseph would not have been absolutely positive yet that his dream was of God, because he's had so much come against him. And now he's in prison with two other men that have had dreams. And he's going to come back in and deal with those dreams. Verse 8 says, and they replied, we both had a dream. They're telling Joseph last night, but no one can tell us what the meaning. Interpreting dreams is God's business. And Joseph replied, so go ahead and tell me your dreams. Joseph identifies, when you want to know the meaning of your dream, you go to God. That's right. Why did I have that dream, Lord? Why? I remember when I was just saved, just starting out, and I had a dream. And in this dream, I saw myself running through this field like Elijah did. And I came up after this long run, I came up to this house, and I went in, and I sat down, and there the Lord was standing there, and he said, prepare for your ministry. That was in 1988. I had no idea what that meant, but I knew that was from God, and he was telling me that he called me, and what he had for me, he would show me. He said, prepare for your ministry. That's what he said to me. I'll never forget those words, no matter where I'm going. So it says there, it says, interpreting dreams is God's business. Joseph replied, go ahead, tell me your dreams. So we won't go into the dreams, because they're not the issue here. But over in verse 14, after Joseph had told both of them their dreams and what they meant, well, after he told the first one, which was the cupbearer, he said, please remember me and do me a favor. When things go well for you, mention me to Pharaoh so he might let me out of this place. He said to him, he said, your dream is that you're going to be restored. The baker was going to be killed. So he told the cupbearer, tell Pharaoh so I might get out of here. I was wrongly treated, should never have been here. Somewhere in there you have to start looking at those things, and it makes a difference. But in verse 23, on chapter 40, he says, Pharaoh's chief cupbearer, however, forgot all about Joseph, never giving him another thought. How often do you think you have an answer? You have a direction. And yet in the midst of that, you find out that that person is going to forget you. Here I gave you an interpretation of a dream. It came out exactly right. Everything you needed. Why didn't you tell the king? But he forgot about it and didn't really think about it anymore. And so Joseph is still in the prison. Start with chapter 41. 2 full years later, Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing on the bank of the Nile. And I'm not going to read the whole dream, because again, it's not the story. It's not where we're going. But then verse 5, it said, he fell asleep again and had a second dream. And so he wakes up, and we'll pick up in verse 8. The next morning, Pharaoh was very disturbed by the dreams. So he called for all the magicians and the wise men of Egypt. When Pharaoh told them his dream, not one of them could tell him what it meant. Finally, the king's chief cupbearer spoke up. Today I have been reminded of my failure. He told Pharaoh, some time ago you were angry with the chief baker and me. You imprisoned us in the place of the captain of the guards. One night the chief baker and I had dreams, and each of our dreams had a meaning, his own meaning. There was a young Hebrew man with us in the prison who was a slave of the captains in the guard. He told us our dreams, and he told us each what our dream meant, and everything happened just as he had predicted it. I was restored to my position as the cupbearer, and the chief baker was executed and impaled on the pole. Pharaoh sent for Joseph at once, and he quickly brought from the prison. After he shaved, changed his clothes, he went in and stood before Pharaoh. Think about it. From a 17-year-old boy who gets put in prison, he's now somewhere in his 20s, and he's lived this life of absolute horrible setting for his whole life. From the time he went down to see his brothers, it has been destructive. So you now have the first sign that something's happening for Joseph, and he still didn't understand it. But he's being brought back to interpret dreams for the king. And you know what happens if you don't interpret a dream right with the king? You're dead. So he's on the line for what's going to happen. Now the character of Joseph to me is one of the most amazing characters because of what he says and how he does. And so it says then Pharaoh said to Joseph, verse 15, and we're in chapter 41. I had a dream last night, and no one here could tell me what it meant. But I have heard that when you heard about a dream, you can interpret it. He said, it is beyond my power to do this, Joseph replied, but God can tell you what it means and set you at ease. So Pharaoh told Joseph his dream. I think about Joseph. His life is on the line. Because they told him, you better do it right, because if you don't, you will be dead. But he still said, I can't interpret a dream. He left it in God's hands, because only God can do that. And so when he finished the dream, he said, verse 28, excuse me, this will happen just as I have described it, for God has revealed to Pharaoh in advance what is about to happen. So he tells Pharaoh that that's what he needs to do. And then he comes to a point in verse 33 and he says, therefore Pharaoh should find an intelligent and wise man and put him in charge of everything, the entire land of Egypt. Joseph was pretty bold because he told him what was going to happen. That we have 7 years of plenty and abundance, then 7 years of drought and famine. And if they didn't prepare right, the whole country would be destroyed. There would be no one left in the country. They would all die. They would have to leave. So verse 37 of chapter 41 says, Joseph's suggestions were well received by Pharaoh and his officials. So Pharaoh asked his officials, can we find anyone else like this man, so obviously filled with the Spirit of God? Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has revealed the meaning of this dream to you, clearly no one else is as intelligent or wise as you are. You will be in charge of my court, and all of my people will take their orders from you. Only I, sitting on my throne, will have rank higher than you. How do you go from being an heir of Jacob to a slave to a prisoner and now second in command if it wasn't God?
Amen.
Do you remember when his brothers said, let's sell him and then see what happens of his dreams? Why do we listen to other people? Why do we look at obstacles as something that's going to keep us from being who we're supposed to be? And so Joseph never complained, just kept going, just kept believing that God was going to open a door for him. And so he kept his focus on God. And all of a sudden, he now is second in command of the entire country of Egypt.
Amen.
See, there's a bigger story. Each story alone was really worth telling. And there are many points to put together, but we still haven't gotten to the purpose. We still haven't gotten far enough along that we can say, why did this happen? Isn't that the question we all ask? God, why am I going through this? Why is this problem happening? Why is all that after me all the time? And I don't know what to do. So chapter 42, we'll pick up again. Verse 6. Since Joseph was governor of all Egypt and in charge of selling grain to all the people, it was to him that his brothers came. When they arrived, they bowed down before him with their faces to the ground. They did not know who he was. But Jacob's first dream just came true. He had to go to an entire different country, go through all the difficulties he had, and all of a sudden, he's in a room making choices of who gets what and who doesn't, and what it's going to cost them. And his 10 brothers, because one's not there at the moment, his 10 brothers are bowed before him, and he recognizes that it's his brothers. What would that do to you? Would you want to kill him? You see, sometimes part of the desert is to change you from the inside out, so you have more mercy and more grace for those that intend to cause you harm.
Amen.
And somewhere we have to make a choice. God, am I going to be your man, or am I going to be my man? Am I going to be all that you want? I'll read you a verse here that has been my strength through all my ministry. And this is in 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 35. And this is the one I pray for myself all the time. 1 Samuel 2:35. Then I will raise up a faithful priest who will serve me and do what I desire. I will establish his family, and they will be priests to my anointed kings forever. Do what's according to his mind, what's on God's heart. That's what God wants to raise up, is somebody who'll be what God wants you to be. And so somewhere in there, Joseph had caught on to that reality. He caught on to the fact that whatever's going on is bigger than me. And all of a sudden I'm looking at my 10 brothers, and they're bowing to me. My circle is coming back around to where I am. What made no sense is making some sense, but I still don't have the full picture. And I'm looking, and I see them bowing. And so we go through a chapter or two of some struggles of how he hides from them, and then tells them, he finds out that Benjamin's alive, his youngest brother, and he tricks them and says, you got to go get Benjamin to bring you back. All these things are happening in the midst of it, and the brothers don't recognize who he is. Because he was speaking Egyptian, and he looked different because he'd grown up the rest of the way and had a beard, and they didn't recognize him. Either that or the Lord just didn't let them recognize him. But he is standing there, and we're walking through all these different pieces, and it makes such a difference. So let's move to chapter 46. He's gone and got his brother Benjamin, brought him back. He finally reveals himself to them. So all his brothers know him. They have this crying session. They become loved. The brothers are fearful that he's going to kill them because he has that power. And yet he runs up to hug every one of them and loves them. That's a true test of being Christ-like. Is when the person who has done you wrong, you face them and say, I love you. I'll never forget a guy that I knew that was a really bad guy. He killed a few people. He'd done several things wrong. And he met Jesus. And it changed him. And one day he was eating in a restaurant. And he left the table to go to the restroom. And he walked in, and there was a man who had done great harm to him. he looked at the man, and the guy thought he was going to kill him on the spot because his old reputation was. And he put his arms out and he said, brother, I just want to tell you I love you. I forgive you for everything. And that man got saved right there in the bathroom. Because he had no idea, had no answer for the pureness of God. When the pureness of God comes out of you, nobody can reject it.
That's right.
Because it's so amazing. But verse 46 is so important. Chapter 46 is so important because it brings the picture back together. So they've gone back to get Jacob, and here's what it says. So Jacob set out for Egypt with all his possessions, and when he came to Beersheba, he offered sacrifice to God, of his father Isaac. During the night, God spoke to him in a vision. Jacob, Jacob, he called. Here I am, Jacob replied. I am God. I don't know about you, but if I heard those words, that's enough for me. I'd be on my face. I am God, the God of your fathers, the voice said. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for there I will make your family into a great nation. The purpose of Joseph's dreams had nothing to do with Joseph. It had to do with God's plan. It had to do with what God was doing all along. We get caught up in the idea that my dream is for me, so it's about me, and it's all about me, and it was never about Joseph. It was always about God's plan. You want to know how to see your ministry grow, how to see yourself become more Christ-like? Lose sight of you and only see God in your life and through your life. So Jacob goes through the dreams, the rejection, being sold, working as a slave, in jail, and all the way back up to leadership because Joseph was going to be used by God to help the Israelites, the family of Jacob, which are not Israelites yet, to survive and become an entire nation. A great nation, God said. We always stop at the small pieces. Wow, that's really good. That's really good. But everything in the Bible is about God's plan. So while the story on Joseph, is lengthy to more than we can possibly read the whole thing in a normal time, the whole picture is so important. When you have something God's asked you to do, it's on God's timing. But can you see how God took every negative, everything that the devil was using, and he used it to put Joseph right where he wanted him, so when the famine was about to come, all the family of Jacob would live and grow to be a great nation, and we would have the nation of Israel today because Joseph went through all that trouble. Stop worrying about when obstacles get in your way. Stop paying attention when somebody does you wrong and focus on one thing. God, can I hear you? Can I pay attention to you? Can I find an answer from you how I'm going to get through all these problems? Everything that you think is bad, I guarantee you, is a path that God's walking you through because it will end you up over here being His perfect servant that will do the things that God has called you to do. If we don't look at the bigger picture sometimes, we will only look at little pockets and we'll never let our faith grow. And here's how it grows. I began to see how God took every obstacle that could possibly stop Joseph from fulfilling his purpose in life. And God brought him through all of it. And Joseph did exactly what God had planned for him to do. So my question tonight is, what has God got planned for you? I don't know it. You may know a small piece of it. You may be in the middle of obstacles coming against you. Brother Paul went through a challenge with cancer. And yet when he got down there, they showed him, oh, we can fix this. Until you're done with your purpose for God, you're not going home. I need to take that worry, that fear out of me and just walk, knowing that no matter what comes against me, God will have me at the end right where I'm supposed to be, right on time, and be the person I'm supposed to be. And all I have to do is keep surrendering. And not keep asking why all the time. Just say, God, you're the righteous judge. You will deliver me. You will get me through this. You will bring me out, and I'll be a better person because of it. I watched my life go this cycle. And but I see pieces coming back together. That's how this jumped out at me. Suddenly I had not paid attention to the whole picture. So while you're talking about 13 chapters, if you go all the way to the end of chapter 50, and then Jacob finally passes away and Joseph passes away, until you get to that point that you realize that God's plan was, no matter what you walk through, my plan still stands for you. I have a plan and it works, and it's to bless you and prosper you and give you a better life. That's what it's about. So you're asking to bow your heads. I know virtually every person in this room tonight enough to know that you're saved. And so I want to ask you, has somebody squashed your dreams lately? Has somebody told you you wouldn't get there? Has somebody told you you would not become anything, you would just fail and you'd fall apart? How many times you have to fail before you fail? Never. We never fail. As long as God keeps getting us up, we keep going. You never give up. You never surrender. But I know there's people here who had thoughts and directions from God. And then 6 months goes down the road, 2 years, I'm in a different direction, I don't understand. And you give up on your dream. And God's got dreams for each of you. Visions, plans, purpose. And if yours is cloudy, not clear, if you're not sure if you even have one, I want you to raise your hand, because I know that there are people in this room that have that struggle. I see those hands going up. I see those hands going up. Somewhere I have to have an answer, God. The answer is the plan is never about you. It's about God's purpose. That's what gets us confused. Everyone of you this, raise your hand. I want you to get up and come down here. Just come on down, line up across here. But I want those who are still sitting in their seats to ask themselves, God, did I have a plan and purpose that I knew at one point that got confusing? And I don't